biggest mistake Elara Ashwood ever made was feeling sorry for a wolf twice her size. 3 months later, that same wolf was sleeping by her fireplace and stealing the last piece of bread off her plate. She had no idea any of that was coming on the morning frost first covered the shutters of Moonshadow Lake. Winter had claimed the forest completely. Snow sat heavy on the pine branches. Smoke curled from the chimney of a small wooden cottage at the edge of the trees, and the lake beyond it had frozen into a sheet of pale glass. It looked like the kind of morning nothing important could happen in. Elara stepped onto her porch, carrying a wooden bowl of stew, the steam rising into the cold air, and stopped when she saw him again. The same enormous black wolf, sitting beneath the old oak across the clearing, watching her the way he had every dawn for the last week. He never growled. He never came closer. He only watched, as if approaching her was beneath him, and being hungry was a secret he refused to admit. The villagers called him cursed. Children threw stones at him from a safe distance. 2 hunters had already tried to track him and come back empty-handed and unsettled. But Elara noticed something the rest of the village never bothered to look for. Underneath the size and the scars, he was starving. His ribs showed faintly beneath matted black fur. His breathing came slow and tired. "You're not scaring me off today either," she said, setting the bowl down in the snow. "So you might as well eat." The wolf did not move. Elara turned and walked back inside, leaving the door slightly open behind her, the way she always did. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the wolf rose and crossed the clearing, silver eyes fixed on the cottage the entire way. He ate quickly, glancing up twice, as if checking whether kindness came with a price. When the bowl was empty, he looked toward the door one final time before disappearing back into the trees. Elara did not know it yet, but she had just fed the alpha king of every northern wolf pack in the kingdom, a man 3 royal armies were currently searching for, and her small act of kindness, repeated morning after morning, was about to change the fate of a crown she had never even seen. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello and find out how far along in the story you are. Chapter 1. The Morning Visitor. By the second week, the wolf had a routine, and so did Elara. Every dawn she filled a bowl with whatever she had, bread, broth, the last of a roast, and left it beneath the oak tree. Every dawn the wolf waited until she was gone before eating, as though being watched while hungry was its own kind of wound. Her rooster, Pip, disagreed entirely with this arrangement. He was small, loud, and convinced the entire cottage yard belonged to him. The first time he spotted the wolf near the porch, he charged across the snow with his feathers puffed to twice their size, shrieking loud enough to wake the whole village. The wolf, who had faced armed soldiers without flinching, took one look at the furious rooster and backed up 3 full steps. Elara laughed so hard she nearly dropped the bowl. "He does that to everyone," she told the wolf, wiping her eyes. "Don't take it personally." The wolf gave her a look that suggested he was, in fact, taking it very personally. Over the following days, something shifted. The wolf stopped waiting quite so far away. He let her set the bowl closer to where he sat. Once, when a fox tried to steal a chicken from her coop, he chased it off before Elara even realized it was there, then returned to his spot beneath the oak like nothing had happened. "You're not just a stray, are you?" she said one morning, crouching a careful distance from him. "Strays don't guard chicken coops for people who barely feed them." The wolf's ears flicked, but he said nothing, because wolves cannot speak, and because Cale Draven had spent 3 weeks convincing himself that staying silent was the only thing keeping her safe. Trust is earned. Word travels fast in a small village, and by the third week, half of Moonshadow Lake had heard that the widow's daughter was feeding the cursed wolf by hand. Hazel Briar, who ran the bakery and considered gossip a public service, cornered Elara at the market with a look of scandalized delight. "They say he sits by your door like a dog," Hazel whispered. "Elara Ashwood, that beast could take your arm off." "He hasn't yet," Elara said, sorting through a basket of turnips. "Yet," Hazel repeated, savoring the word. Rowan Holt, the blacksmith, was less amused. He had known Elara's family since she was a child, and he did not trust an animal capable of snapping a grown man's arm like a twig. He showed up at her cottage, uninvited one evening, hammer still in hand, ready to chase the wolf off for good. He found the wolf lying peacefully near the woodpile, while Elara hummed and stacked logs 3 feet away, entirely unbothered. "He hasn't hurt me, Rowan," she said, before he could speak. "Not once." Rowan studied the wolf for a long moment. The wolf studied him back, calm and unblinking, and something about the intelligence in those silver eyes made the blacksmith lower his hammer, though he still didn't like it. "Just because he hasn't yet," Rowan muttered, echoing Hazel without knowing it, "doesn't mean he won't." Elara only smiled and went back to stacking wood. She had made up her mind about the wolf long before the village had an opinion, and she saw no reason to change it now. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Forest. 2 riders arrived at the edge of the village that same week, asking careful questions about a large black wolf seen near the lake. They wore no house colors, carried no obvious weapons, and claimed to be traveling merchants. Elder Mira, the oldest woman in Moonshadow Lake, watched them from her window and did not believe a word of it. "Merchants don't ask about wolves," she told Elara later, pressing a bundle of dried herbs into her hands. "Bounty hunters do. Keep your doors locked, child, and keep an eye on that animal of yours. There is more to him than fur and teeth." That night, Elara woke to the sound of something moving through the trees near her coop. She grabbed a lantern and stepped outside to find the black wolf standing between her and 2 strangers dressed in dark leather, blades drawn. He did not growl a warning. He simply placed himself in front of her and waited, muscles coiled, eyes locked on the intruders like a soldier who had done this 100 times before. The strangers exchanged a glance, clearly unwilling to test a wolf that size at close range, and melted back into the darkness. Elara stood frozen on her porch, lantern shaking slightly in her hand. "You knew they were coming," she said quietly. "Didn't you?" The wolf turned to look at her, and for the first time she thought she saw something almost like guilt in his eyes, as if he wished he could explain and hated that he couldn't. "Whatever you're hiding," she said, kneeling to meet his gaze, "I'm not afraid of it. I just want you safe." Chapter 4. The kindness that changes everything. The wound revealed itself by accident. Elara was cleaning a scrape on the wolf's shoulder from the encounter with the strangers when her fingers brushed a patch of fur near his ribs that never seemed to heal. Beneath it, the skin held a faint silver shimmer, cold to the touch, even by the fire. "This isn't a normal injury," she murmured, and the wolf went very still, as if bracing for her to finally be afraid of him. She wasn't. She cleaned it anyway, wrapped it in soft cloth, and spoke softly the entire time, the way she spoke to every frightened creature that ever wandered onto her land. The next day, she brought the strange wound to Elder Mira, describing the silver shimmer and the cold that never seemed to fade. The old woman's face went pale. "Silver cursed," Mira said, I've only heard stories. A wound like that traps whatever creature carries it, sometimes in a shape not its own. Old magic says only one thing can weaken a curse built from cruelty and betrayal. What's that? Kindness with nothing expected in return, Mira said. Real kindness, not pity, not fear. The kind you've been giving that wolf since the day you met him, whether you realized it or not. Elara walked home, turning the old woman's words over in her mind, and for the first time she looked at the wolf and wondered who, exactly, she had been feeding all along. Chapter 5. A Kingdom Without Its King. Far from Moonshadow Lake, inside the capital, the Northern Moon Pack was unraveling. Commander Darius Voss, captain of the Alpha King's Royal Guard, had spent 2 months searching every province for a king who had vanished without a word, and every empty trail was wearing his patience thin. He was wounded and cursed by his own council, and now half the kingdom thinks he's dead, Darius told his second-in-command, pacing the war room. The other half thinks he ran from his duty. Neither is true, and I intend to prove it. The Royal Council, meanwhile, had grown comfortable ruling in Kale's absence. They pushed forward a political marriage between the throne and a powerful noble family, insisting a Luna was needed to steady the kingdom, whether the king returned or not. Every week he stayed missing made their plan easier to finalize. Darius refused to accept it. He remembered the king before the betrayal, sharp-minded and fiercely loyal to his people, nothing like the ghost of rumors the council now spoke of. Following a report about strange hunters near Moonshadow Lake, he finally had a lead worth chasing. "Ready the horses," he said. "We're going north." Chapter 6. Betrayal Revealed. The attack came on a moonless night. 3 armed men broke through the tree line while Elara was banking the fire, drawn by weeks of rumors about a wolf worth more gold than any of them had ever seen. The wolf met them at the door before they reached it, and the fight that followed shook the walls of the cottage. Elara grabbed the fire poker and swung it at the nearest attacker without a second thought, buying the wolf enough space to knock a second man off his feet. But a blade meant for the wolf's throat caught his side instead, and he staggered, breathing hard, blood dark against black fur. "No," Elara said, dropping to her knees beside him, pressing her hands to the wound. "Not like this. Not after everything." Something in her voice, raw and unguarded, and entirely without fear for herself, cracked through whatever silver magic had been holding him prisoner for months. Light spread from beneath her hands, and the massive black wolf began to shrink and shift, bones and fur rearranging into something else entirely, until a man knelt in the snow where the wolf had been seconds before. He was tall, dark-haired, with the same striking silver eyes, blood on his side, and disbelief on his face. The remaining attacker took one look at the transformation and fled into the trees. Elara stared at him, hands still trembling. "You're a man," she whispered. "I'm sorry," Kyle said, voice rough from disuse. "I should have told you sooner." Chapter 7. The Alpha King Returns. Commander Darius arrived at the cottage the following morning, following smoke and rumor and a trail of broken branches, and found his missing king sitting by a modest hearth with a bandaged side, drinking tea from a chipped cup like it was the finest meal he'd had in months. "Your Majesty." Darius dropped to one knee, relief and fury fighting for control of his voice. "We searched every province. The council has been planning your funeral and your replacement in the same breath." "I know," Kyle said. "I couldn't return cursed and powerless. I would have handed the throne to whoever struck me down." He told Darius everything: the ambush by council members he had trusted, the silver blade, the curse that trapped him in wolf form, the months spent surviving in the forest, until a stranger with too much compassion for her own good started leaving food outside her door and never stopped. Darius looked between the king and the quiet, steady young woman standing near the fire, and understood immediately what had actually broken the curse. "The council will not be pleased," Darius said carefully. "The council," Kel answered, "tried to have me killed. I am done being pleasing to them." On to Chapter 8. Love Against the Crown. News of the king's return spread through the capital within days, and the royal council responded exactly as Darius predicted. They summoned Kyle home, praised his survival publicly, and privately pushed harder than ever for the political marriage meant to secure their own influence over the throne. "The kingdom needs stability, Your Majesty," Councillor Ashgrove insisted during a tense audience. "A Luna from a noble house guarantees alliances. Sentiment cannot rule a kingdom." "Sentiment," Carl said evenly, "is the only reason I'm alive to argue with you at all. A woman with no house, no title, and nothing to gain fed a starving animal every morning for months because she believed every creature deserved kindness. That is worth more to this kingdom than any alliance drawn up on paper." The council was not finished. Rumors reached the village that Elara was nothing more than a passing distraction, a country girl who would be quietly dismissed once the coronation was settled. Hazel arrived at the cottage in tears over the gossip, and even steady, unshakable Rowan looked ready to march on the capital himself. Elara, for her part, said very little. She packed a bag, kissed Pip on the head, and told them both the same thing: "I'm not waiting at home to find out what they decide about my life. I'm going to hear it for myself." Chapter 9. The Luna's Choice. The throne room stood packed with nobles, guards, and pack leaders from every corner of the kingdom the day the royal council presented their chosen candidate for Luna. Kyle sat on the throne in full royal dress, dark leather, and a fur-lined cloak, looking every bit the kingdom remembered, and nothing like the exhausted stranger of the morning ritual, except for his eyes, still the same silver that had watched Elara from beneath an oak tree months earlier. When the council finished their introduction of the noble candidate, Cal rose instead of accepting her. He walked past the throne, past the council, past a room full of people who controlled half the kingdom's fortune, and stopped in front of Elara, who stood near the back in her simple cream dress, feeling completely out of place and refusing to leave anyway. He knelt. "The woman who fed me when I had nothing to offer her deserves every honor this crown can give," Kyle said, voice carrying through the silent hall. "My title gave me power. Her kindness taught me how to actually deserve it. Elara Ashwood, will you become my Luna?" The throne room held its breath. Then Commander Darius knelt first, followed by the packs, row by row, until the entire hall had bowed before a woman who, 3 months earlier, had simply refused to let a hungry animal go without a meal. "Yes," Elara said, voice unsteady but certain. "Yes, I will." The royal council said nothing at all, which was, for once, exactly what Carl wanted from them. Chapter 10. Home at Moonshadow Lake. The traitors within the council were exposed within the month, the silver blade traced back to the very councillor who had pushed hardest for the political marriage. Carl rebuilt his court around loyalty proven, not titles inherited, and Commander Darius stayed close as the one voice he trusted without question. Elara did not abandon Moonshadow Lake. She turned part of the palace grounds into a sanctuary for injured wolves and wild animals, cared for regardless of rank, species, or usefulness to anyone, the same way she had once cared for a wolf with nothing to give her back. Hazel supplied the sanctuary with bread every week and told anyone who would listen that she had always known the wolf was special. Rowan built every enclosure himself and never once mentioned that he'd been wrong. Every morning, even as Luna of the Northern Moon Pack, Elara still set out a bowl by the sanctuary gate before sunrise, not because anyone there was starving anymore, but because she wanted the kingdom to remember that kindness should never depend on someone's title, their species, or what they could offer in return. Pip, naturally, appointed himself guardian of the entire sanctuary and spent his days terrorizing wolves twice the size of the one he'd once chased off a porch. Kyle found her there one morning, watching the sunrise over the lake the way she had the day this all began. "You saved a king who couldn't even tell you his own name," he said, wrapping an arm around her. "I fed a hungry wolf," Elara said, leaning into him. "The rest, you did yourself." Behind them, the sanctuary stirred awake, and the kingdom, finally, was at peace. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello and find out how far along in the story you are.